I'll let them finish. Okay. So, hello again. I am PG Wobbles. I am joined by Kyle Nola.
Noya.
Noya, right.
Okay, you got the first name right.
I got the first name right. And
my name is Charlie, also known as Lady C.
And this is our mindset, stress management, and mental skills training panel. I'm nervous. So this is the perfect chance to see if these theories work.
We'll work on that.
We'll do our
First
best.
step is acknowledging it, so
So,
you're on the
okay.
path.
To give you guys like the super quick synopsis, competition is difficult and it's stressful. And your ability to manage that, the stress, the emotions, and regulate yourself is key to keeping yourself in a state of optimal performance. It's not magically going to make you better at whatever it is you do, but it is going to keep you from being worse. And it's also going to make you enjoy yourself a lot more. So we're going to be going into some of the strategies, the techniques you can use, as well as a performance psychology crash course 101 sort of thing. And we hope you all enjoy it.
All right, so we're going to start off. I'm actually a fourth-year PhD student in cognitive neuroscience, and I've done some original research in the Smash community about this very topic. So we're going to start off with a few of my results and theoretical things. So first of all, when we talk about Smash, or anything, what is an expert? And in the case of Smash, really consistent performance is what we're looking for. That's one of those things that really goes into these top rankings and stuff like that. And from the years of practice and effort we put into this, we end up getting a different structure to the very way we think about the game, right? As you become more and more expert, your skills become automatic, and you find it changes your cognitive architecture so that you can chunk things more easily. For example, if you're trying to remember a phone number, you could try to remember 7 numbers individually, or you could try to remember 911, 2012 to 2012, right? That's 2 chunks, easier to remember. The same thing happens in gaming as you practice. What you're seeing here is just a visual representation that I know it looks like a Triforce, but that is copyrighted, so it's totally not a Triforce.
It's a Triforce.
Might as well.
That just gets into some of the basic theories that I've been working on of what Smash skill is structured like. So at the bottom we have motor skill, so pushing buttons the way you want to, controlling your character. Game knowledge, so that's from the basics of like what matchups are good to literal frame data. Both of those support the high-level play at the very top, which is things like strategy, things like mix-ups. In the middle is a triangle of emotion regulation, which, as we're going to talk about today, affects everything else. That's why it's in the middle. So this is just a good framework to lead our discussion. So data from 192 Smashers that I gathered at national tournaments last year shows that there are some major differences between ranked and unranked players in some ways that we're talking about with this cognitive architecture changing. So when it comes to, I ask you how good you are on a scale of 1 to 10 at 16 skills that have to do with Smash. So dealing with like in-game mistakes like SDs, game knowledge, stage knowledge, all of those things. It turns out that experts are better at ranking themselves on their knowledge. Unranked players sometimes don't know what you don't know. So it's easier to say, oh yeah, I'm at like a top level, when you don't realize what it takes to be at a top level. Additionally, both unranked and unranked players, the years you've been playing really count towards your performance. So I'm comparing this to how they actually did in the tournament, and the years you've been playing, of course, predict your performance. However, one really interesting difference that gets at the point we're getting at is that for unranked players, the amount you practice really has an effect on how you place. However, for expert players who have been playing for 10 years or whatever, they've already have these automated skills. They have these chunks, these mental chunks, and that really allows them to kind of go on autopilot and not have to practice and grind it out because they've already put hours into doing that.
This also speaks to something really important, which is that mindset and emotional skills, these are not magic. This is kind of our disclaimer here. These are not going to catapult you to the top. Like, you can't just meditate instead of practice. You have to put the time in. The goal is to give yourself better access to the things you have unlocked through practice. So when you're at home, you're sitting there, you're doing everything perfectly. You get into a tournament, you start to crumble. Well, that's no good for you. You would rather that not happen. So the fact that you know you can do it, like, that's cool, but for some reason in tournament you can't. And that's where the emotional regulation skills come in.
All right, so just to guide our discussion, hopefully people picked up pamphlets. So we defined working memory there, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more because that's really the key of what our emotion regulation strategy, what we're recommending. So, just a working definition, working memory tends to be our mental scratch pad. It's the form of short-term memory where we actually manipulate information and don't just like repeat it over and over again, right? And like we were saying earlier, when you chunk, that means you can use your working memory better. And Wobbles pointed out that we already have words for this in our community.
Yeah. You already do this like all the time. You know, you've got a jump and you've got an air dodge. Well, when you combine them together, what do you get? You get a wave dash, or you get a self-destruct, whatever. We've been there. But the idea here is that you have these two units of information, these two inputs, but when you chunk, you actually turn them into one unit. So now instead of thinking, I need to jump and then I need to air dodge, you think to yourself, I need to wave dash. This is a much more fluid way of thinking about the game. And then that continues to evolve where you suddenly say, okay, well, if I shine first, then I wave dash, well, that's a wave shine. So now your conversation has chunked even more. It's gotten even more condensed, more efficient. So now it's wave shine. And then that can become wave shine out of shield. And that is still just mentally one unit inside your brain. And this is part of what allows top players to autopilot, is that they think about the game differently because these building blocks, they're becoming more condensed and effective. So then you start to come up with really cute names for stuff like Armada's Shine Edgeguard in the Fox Ditto, and we call it the Armando. But you know what that is. Like, in your head, it's like a really quick password for this entire string of events. And now it's just one thing. That lets you talk about really lengthy strings in the game very efficiently. And this is what we mean when we say experts think about their games differently. They don't think jump, down B, jump, air dodge, C-stick up, mess up, throw controller. No, they just do it all at once. It's beautiful. So moving on, like, that's a big part of what we're talking about, is this efficiency of thinking and essentially freeing up your mind to think more abstractly, more creatively, or as we're going to go into, focus on yourself without having to pay so much attention to the mechanics of the game, so you can regulate your internal emotional state and do better.
Great. So, in my studies, I've also asked people to rate themselves on emotion regulation, and when I compare that to skill, ultimately, emotion regulation does not predict performance. That is, well, next point. That would make us think that, oh, this isn't as important as skill. That's true. Work on your skills first. That is the thing that will get you further in tournament. However, when emotion regulation goes wrong, when you get too excited, too hyped, too nervous, and you choke, that affects your performance, right? Maybe not 50% of the time, maybe only 10% of the time, but we still want to fix that 10% of the time. In general, my results seem to suggest that as smashers, we're already super motivated, super ready to get out there and play the game. And really what we struggle with is not so much a problem of getting hyped, but getting overhyped. So those are some of the strategies we're going to focus on today. And it's not always a huge difference that I found. It's not that you totally lost your whole set because you were nervous, but maybe you drop a game, and maybe that does lead to a set, that kind of thing.
It's also worth noting in that little 2-0 to 2-1 that if the better player starts getting nervous and they start losing, then all the guys who are behind their regional, like, 7th ranked PR who's about to get a top 100 win start screaming. And then your buddy starts getting nervous and he starts to choke. And then it's a total slop fest. Those are the best matches to watch. Not to play, though. They're terrible.
Exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Right.
All right, so all of us are going to talk now about basically performance psych 101. I brought up this concept of being overhyped, of arousal, and now we're going to discuss what that actually means for your performance.
I'll go. Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to point out that I'm currently a graduate student for performance psychology, and so that's why I'm here. So essentially, this is the Yerkes-Dodson, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Inverted U principle, and so essentially so we want to ideally be up at the top of the bell curve. That's where you're going to be at your strongest in terms of performance. And so, and that's, there's this ideal range of emotions. And if you are below that curve, that's kind of where you're sandbagging and you're like, well, I don't care about this. This is dumb. Why am I even here? And then, on the right side, when you go past that ideal point, that's kind of where you start to choke, you get really nervous, your anxiety builds up in really tense sets, and that's kind of where things start to crumble.
Yeah.
And so, and so ideally, what you want to do, and sort of like the premise of mental skills, which we'll get into, is that you want to get up to that sweet spot, that top of the bell curve, and you want to stay there. And so we're going to kind of go into some strategies that you can use to get you up to that point on command and keep you there.
Yeah. So just a quick aside, one of the reasons Dr. Piggy's so interested in competitive gaming is because it has this really unique place when it comes to performance and stress, which is, let's say you're a lineman in football, you just want to be like full warrior mode because you're going to be slamming into another 8 foot tall, 500 pound of meat wearing football pads. Like, you just need anger, you need strength. But for us, as you start to get more stressed, your hands start to shake. You want to tilt, and not that kind of tilt. You want to up tilt without jumping. You want to hit the perfect Firefox angle. You want to do all that stuff, and you want to do it on demand, and you need to do it quickly. So you've got this precision demand. Well, when the adrenaline starts pumping, that gets really difficult. It's also really hard to think creatively and kind of outside the box, or even think about yourself and adapt when you're that amped up. So on the one hand, you want to be really zen and calm. On the other hand, you want to react to stuff like, in fractions of a second. You're going to be timing stuff down to the frame, so you need to be pumped, but you don't want to be that pumped. So for Smash, a lot of gaming, but Smash especially, with all of our little millimeter perfect stuff on the joystick, you have to be very, very careful about where on this curve you find yourself.
You definitely want to hit that sweet spot. Everyone has their own particular sweet spot where they play at their peak, and so the goal is to just get up to that point and stay there.
All right, so now that we're all on the same page as far as the basics of performance psychology, we're going to actually talk about the specific mental skills that you can use to perform ideally, or at least not be hampered down by your emotions.
And so essentially mental skills training is it's considered the canon of sports psychology. It's the basic practical uses of sports psychology. And so mental skills, they're particular skills, thoughts, habits, so forth, that help regulate your emotions. They help you stay focused on the particular task. In this case, the tournament set, the game, instead of things that are sort of outside your realm. And, as we mentioned here, they're skills. And so, sort of what Wobbles was saying earlier, you can't just practice these things or just do it once and then expect to hit top 8. That's just not how it works. And so, a lot of this requires you to put in the deliberate work, much like you would your tech skill or your matchup knowledge or stuff like that. And so mental skills, they'll help you focus. They'll help you stay in that curve. They'll help you hit that sweet spot, stay in that, hype sweet spot. And they'll help you stay motivated, but the right kind of motivation instead of, and so it'll help you basically enjoy your experience and find that internal intrinsic love for the game. And not only that, but it'll help prevent burnout. And so utilizing these mental skills will kind of help you calm yourself, focus, and prevent you from tilting and burning out.
Again, disclaimer that emotion regulation skills are pretty much preventative. They're not going to make you better than what your practice skills already are.
Yeah, the one big thing that I would add to all of that is that while we are talking about performance and wanting to play your best, like, there are a lot of players in the community who show up and they just start to feel like sick. They don't want to play that day. They're crazy stressed out. And when I first kind of stopped competing for a while, I told people, this is amazing. I just show up to the event, I hang out, I play a friendly, I'm tired, I take a big yawn, I go back to my hotel room, I fall asleep. And they're like, that sounds incredible. I'm like, yeah, I don't have to get up for 8 a.m. pools. You guys are idiots. But then I kind of started to miss it. You know, no one quits Smash, right? We're here. We come back. And this whole enjoying yourself, it might not always be like crazy fun in games, but staying motivated, staying focused, eye on the prize, that sort of thing. We don't always talk about that element. We're thinking about getting in the zone so that you can be Terminator-like Armada, and you don't choke in top 8 and you just blast through people. But at the same time, that emotional regulation is what lets you avoid burning out and feeling like everything is this mountain of stress that you can't climb.
Okay, so we intend to spend the most time on this slide because these are specific things that you can do. We have it divided up by time because there are different working memory demands for every emotion regulation strategy. And so some make more sense in the moment, some make more sense long term.
And so we can get started with sort of like in the moment things. So this is literally like things will help you when you're literally in the middle of the set on the platform, you know, getting ready to go into that big edge guard situation. Some good things to do. Deep breathing is the biggest one, I think. And so what I like to do personally is take a big deep breath for 3 counts, hold it for 3 counts, and then exhale for 3 counts. And making sure you're doing it mindfully and slowly. That's the best thing. And then grounding is another one. So just how would you guys best describe
So grounding,
in that situation?
I think it's just a way to reconnect yourself to the world around you instead of getting caught up in your head. A lot of times when we freeze up, it's because like our mind is racing. Grounding is just remembering the feeling of the controller in your hand. Taking a deep breath, listening to the game music. Reconnecting with the physical world brings you back out of your head.
Yeah, like your thoughts are rebounding around inside of your head, and of course they trigger other thoughts. And you've probably thought about like a conversation at some point that made you mad, and then you can just kind of make yourself mad again without anything even happening. You can like argue with yourself in the shower or with somebody imaginary, or you just remember something crummy that happened the other day and you're suddenly in a bad mood. You can also do it positively, but the whole idea here is that thoughts are just kind of ping-ponging around in your head and activating other ones, whereas the sensory world kind of refreshes that. It sort of resets all of that. If you start focusing on concrete physical things, you stop getting into that ping-pong cascade of thoughts, because once those thoughts start kicking in and they start getting negative, then they stress you out. Like, man, I really suck today. I thought I was good at this matchup. Everyone's watching me on stream. I hate this game. Why am I here? Well, those thoughts start activating each other, they stress you out, and then now you're not just stressed out from the thoughts, you're playing worse. Because all that stuff we talked about working memory, you needed that to focus on the game. Now you're not even paying attention to the game. Now you're not just playing worse because you're stressed, you're playing worse because you're thinking about how bad you are.
Yeah.
So now you're playing worse, that's stressing you out. You're thinking about how awful you are, that's stressing you out. Being stressed makes you think stressful thoughts. And this is how you start sliding off the top of that curve, and it just turns into a roller coaster ride all the way to the bottom.
And it kind of turns into a spiral, a downward spiral that, you know, eventually just completely, goes out of control. And so, you know, another really good way to manage that, especially between sets, on tournament day, what have you, is positive self-talk. And so essentially, positive self-talk is, you know, those thoughts that sort of ping pong in your head, and you want to sort of make sure that those are positive, you know, like for example, instead of saying, I can't believe I lost that match, I suck, what have you, instead you're saying, I'm doing the best that I can. I got up at a reasonable time. I had a good breakfast. I'm ready to go. This is just a setback. Having those more positive, like constructive thoughts. And so then another thing you can do too, reappraisal or cognitive restructuring, is basically taking those negative thoughts and spinning it into more like positive thoughts. And so, for example, sorry. So with the example of, I can't believe I lost that match, I suck, you want to take that thought and then sort of like build up evidence to refute it. So for example, like, I'm still working on that matchup. I've had a long day. I had this weird edge guard situation where they just outplayed me. And so then you want to take that evidence and spin it into a more positive thought. And so that would be, instead of saying, I can't believe I lost that matchup, this stinks, I'm not good at this game, what am I doing? You can say something more like, oh, well, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring things out. I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this experience and learn from it. Yeah. And then another thing you can do.
One thing about reappraisal, is that it is highly supported by neuroscience literature, by psychology literature, that is a very effective way to calm yourself down, to get things more positive. However, it is highly working memory demanding, because not only do you have to recognize those bad thoughts that you're having, but you have to critically examine them and then have a new thought. So that's why it's better between sets, not something you should be doing while you're playing.
Yeah. And another big thing about this isn't just like about buttering yourself up or patting yourself on the head or saying, oh, there, it's okay, because that's one of the last things that you want to hear when you just lost a tight battle or you choked away a win. The goal here is not to delude yourself, and it's not to try and brush away the fact that you feel crappy. The goal is to turn it into something that's actually productive, because sometimes maybe you've seen like somebody comment on something online and they're like, this sucks, it's boring. It's boring. It's like, okay, well, how can I do better? Nothing. They got nothing. It's not productive. It's like, it's cool if you've got a criticism. Like, that's fine, because none of us are perfect. But it's got to be specific, and it's got to be targeted, and it has to be oriented at something you can do about it. Because what you notice is that the people who tilt the most don't have an action in mind after they've tilted. It's like, this matchup sucks. Well, what are you going to do about it? Complain. Like, duh, I'm going to go on Twitter and I'm going to let everyone know. It's like, no, this is not the way forward. And it's certainly not effective if you're thinking that way in the middle of a set. So when we're talking about positive self-talk, it's not just there. It's not about Johning. It's not about excuses. It's about being productive and targeted towards doing better. And it's also about not lying to yourself in the negative direction. We're going to talk a bit about some common pitfalls. One of the worst ones is generalizations, overgeneralizations, like, I always mess that up, or I never win this matchup, or stuff like that. No one ever cheers for me. We have this we're able to be biased in the positive direction about ourselves, but we can also do it in the negative. And positive self-talk is more about, if you were tilting in the negative direction, like, you can also be biased there and tell yourself how awful you are all the time and forget your victories. If you go 6-2 in a major tournament and then you tell yourself you suck, what about those 6 times you won? What about like the time you clutched out game 2 last stock on like your winners finals of your first pool? Like, whoa, that was sick. You're sick. Go you. Don't forget that there are good and productive things that are happening to you, because when you start overgeneralizing, you just convince yourself that it's hopeless. And when things are hopeless, you want to quit. And that is the most unproductive thing you can do when it comes to improvement.
All right, so I'm going to go over the rest of them really quick because we're kind of short on time. So body scans is another really big one. So basically, as you're taking big, deep breaths, sort of going from the top down and sort of acknowledging any stress, any like places of tension, and sort of like not judging them or anything, but just being like kind of aware of them. That will help in relaxation as well. Medium term, so just sort of like leading up to the tournament. I mean, obviously these are things that you should be doing anyway, but if push comes to shove, These are some good things that will help you. So exercise, just light exercise, getting a good night's sleep, so no partying till 4 a.m. And then diet, that also includes caffeine intake if you can. And then things in the long term, so meditation training and mindfulness. If you haven't done that already, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Meditation and just like being mindful and aware and in the moment is huge.
And note that it's training. If you tried meditation once and you're like, if you tried meditation twice and you were like, that's not going to be enough. Literally, there are studies that show meditation, quote, rewires the way that your brain works, the way you respond to emotion. In order to have that neuroplasticity kick in, you got to do it a lot. But once you do, it's going to be easier to get into that meditative state. So that's why it's long term, but also super worth it.
It's a skill like anything else.
Yeah. And it's really easy to get vacuumed into all those internal monologues without realizing you're doing it. Meditation, mindfulness meditation especially, is pretty much listening to yourself think. Maybe you've been in an argument with someone and they start ranting and you're like, dude, just listen to yourself. Well, that's kind of the internal version of that, where you start thinking things that you would not say to anyone that you wanted to stay friends with. You wouldn't even say it to people you hated online, but we might say just terrible things to ourselves in our own head, and we don't realize we're doing it. It's basically verbal abuse to the person who can do the most about your situation, which is you. It's no wonder you don't really feel all that revved up to fix things after you've been bombarding yourself with negativity. So meditation, mindfulness especially, is just slowing down and listening to yourself and getting good at listening to yourself. So when suddenly a red flag thought comes in, you go, ooh, not helping. Maybe I can beat myself up after the set is over. But how about now I actually pay attention to the video game?
And then really quick, before we kind of go into our closing stuff, so task-oriented goals is a really big thing too. So the difference between task-oriented goals and ego-oriented goals is that task-oriented goals are aimed toward enjoyment for the game, mastery, those kinds of things, whereas ego goals, that's stuff like, I want to beat this particular person, I want to make PR, I want to show off, I want to make top 8. And so task-oriented goals are really important because it helps you stay motivated and it helps you keep your mind on things that you can control. It's within your internal locus of control, which is a fancy sports psychology term for basically saying that's under your control. Whereas ego-oriented goals like making top 8, what have you, those are sort of more things that are out of your control. And then obviously, if things are really, really bad, then cognitive behavioral therapy is incredibly helpful.
I even recommend cognitive behavioral therapy for anyone because, gosh, right now I'm giving you permission. Have emotions. Feel them. If they're bad, if you don't think you should, if this is not what a guy should feel like or a girl should feel like, whatever, doesn't matter. If you want a career in esports, you need to be in touch with your emotions and know how to talk about them. Cognitive behavioral therapy for anybody. It doesn't mean you're sick. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's you don't just go to the gym because you got an injury and your leg is busted and you want to fix it because the muscle atrophied. No, we go to the gym to get stronger. This is more or less the concept of treating it as a mental gym where you're not just trying to not be a useless lump, but also maybe you want to be legit strong. And that applies to how you think about yourself on the inside and how you frame situations. Because you don't just want to be not miserable. That's a great start. Don't get me wrong. It's a great start. But being actively more positive, productive, and focused is also a noble goal in itself. And the idea of therapy purely for people who are currently having problems, yeah, they need it, but we can all benefit from it.
So these last few slides are just some common pitfalls, things that we've already talked about, but things that might manifest or resonate with you. So if you find yourself saying things like, I suck, I'm never going to get this matchup, you got to break that loop. If you try one strategy that we gave you and it didn't work and you lost, you got to remember that this is all preventative advice and that your skills have to be trained. There's also a chance of self-sabotage. It could be that you're trying to give yourself an excuse by staying out till 4 a.m. getting drunk, then coming home and then going to pools at 10 a.m. and not doing well. You're like, oh, I was out partying. That's self-sabotage. You didn't give yourself the best chance you could. Don't do that. And then, of course, as Charlie was just talking about, when this is about your ego, when a loss means that you as a person are worse, that's a bad mindset to have. Focus on the skills, because that's where you actually have control, and that's where you can actually improve. So thanks for coming to our panel. We're going to be standing at the back for any questions, and we also have a bunch of extra flyers that we can give out there.
Yep. Thank you all for joining us.
Doctor?